we dump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the world as a whole warms.
The long-term trend continues to show a warming cycle throughout the world.
The overall trend is one of sort of warming, particularly warming winters.
For the Atlantic provinces, well, the summers are changing, the winters are changing. Winter seems to be starting later and later every year.
Years ago, you would never hear tell of getting freezing rain or rain in the winter time. And but the last couple of years, it happens. It's not uncommon to have a green Christmas.
In the early 70s, when the ground froze the 15th of November, it never thawed out again until the 1st of April. Now, before Christmas we were wading mud, after Christmas we were wading mud. And
10 years, I mean, I could see a big difference in the weather pattern. We don't get that cold weather staying so long now. I mean, if you get a week of cold weather now, it's over,
Just like the bear, right now, this is January and he's still wandering around and he should be sleeping.
Bear are waking up earlier, coming out of their dens a little bit earlier and checking things out.
The sow would be having her young right about now, and she's sleeping and she's feeding that young. But it's too warm, and she's active.
I don't know whether that's air temperature or ground temperature, but it does affect them. They are coming out earlier, and they're staying out later.
2010 was the warmest year on record in Canada.
All of the models are in agreement, and they all show warming. There's no doubt about that.
There has been an increase in ambient temperature over the last few years, and that changes some of the crops that can be grown. You can grow crops that require more heat units than we could before, some of the corn crops, some of maybe the soybean crops and so on.
people are growing weeping mulberry trees, which in the 1980s you would have lost. They're growing peach trees even in certain areas.
The seasons are getting longer here, so you add 2 weeks to the season and you can grow 2-3 more different varieties.
What it shows is that there is a consistent general pattern that has changed.
Water temperature has been warming up in the Bay of Fundy, and you're starting to see the right whale moving up more all the time.
We're getting unbelievable catches here in the fall. The last 2 years has been record-breaking. I think it's the lobster are moving further north for colder water.
I've been here about 31 years living in the village, and I've seen a change in different areas, but most of it's from the power of the sea.
The oceans themselves are just essentially expanding because of the increased temperatures in the atmosphere. So we have this thermal expansion problem. So the tides, the water levels are naturally rising just because of that extra energy in the atmosphere.
It's of concern. I mean, you're talking potentially a meter, maybe 1.5 meters by 2100.
If global warming continues or gets worse, where the Arctic ice caps are going to melt more than they already are, and seawaters are going to rise more, and we know that the isthmus, the ground is actually sinking.
All of the landscape here at the head of the Bay of Fundy is actually going down. Technically, it's called subsidence. It ripples out of the after effect of the last glaciation.
These are communities that are very, very vulnerable to sea level rise and storm surge. We have a lot of subsided areas that exist behind dikes, and we've had a lot of development behind those dikes.
So the two put together with the sea levels rising and the ground levels reducing, you can see that it's going to be increasingly hard to maintain the dikes.
The dikes are now a subject to concern because a few things are happening. First of all, they're eroding quicker than they would have in the past. And second, they're not quite high enough.
In these areas, because they are the low-lying areas, if we get a lot of heavy precipitation, those areas are going to fill up, such as areas of Truro, for example.
The biggest threat probably from climate change is sea level rise, and therefore the vulnerability of our infrastructure to damage or inaccessibility during floods, damage to human life as well as land and property.
Sea level rise is an issue, but even then these storm surges we were discussing before cause massive problems for anybody living too close to shore.
If you get a heavy northeast wind here and you get an extremely high tide, you're definitely going to get a surge.
Worst storm surges we get here are on the order of about 1.5 meters, maybe up to 2 meters in extreme cases.
If you've ever seen a tide surge, it's something like a mini tsunami in a way. You can actually sit there and you can watch it coming up the street.
In the future, with warmer ocean temperatures, one could expect that hurricanes coming up would retain their energy longer.
We have tropical storms now that are pretty intense. You combine that with rising sea levels, and you've got a recipe for disaster.
When we're talking about Atlantic Canada, we're talking about a place that expects hurricanes. Hurricanes are a part of our natural climate.
The hurricane season, how much the hurricanes have changed. They've changed in intensity, they seem to be changing their track. An awful lot coming up off of Nova Scotia. Once they get off of Nova Scotia, they kind of turn to the north and come in over land, all right?
If you're in New York City and you're worried, you should be worried, because I don't think you're going to fix it very easily. It's going to be an expensive proposition. It'll be like being in Venice. You'll have to build gates and kind of rock fortifications against the sea outside and try to control the rising tides periodically.